Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I would like to call to order the Everett City Council meeting of October 6, 2021. In accordance with the Governor's Healthy Washington guidelines and in an effort to protect city employees and members of the public from transmission of COVID-19, the City Council is conducting our weekly council meeting remotely. We are prepared to reopen the council chambers to public meetings when public health considerations indicate it is safe for us to do so. There are several ways in which you can engage with the council and participate in our meetings. To watch or participate in our remote meetings, you may watch council meetings live on Comcast Channel 21 or Frontier Channel 29. You may watch live online at www.everettwa.gov/citycouncil, where you may also watch past meetings. You may call in to listen to the live meeting at any point by dialing 425-616-3920. Conference ID is 724-887-726#. You may find the public comment registration form on the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Once you go to the register here to provide comment via Zoom link, you'll need to fill the form out completely if you wish to provide public comment at a future meeting. After the public comment form is submitted, you will receive an email confirmation with the Zoom link and the phone number to the meeting. Participants must submit this form at least 30 minutes prior to the meeting. Forms submitted after that time will not receive the Zoom link or number to speak, but may still participate the day of the meeting by submitting comments in writing to council@everettwa.gov. For assistance, please contact the council office at 425-257-8703 or email Deb Williams at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. Please note that we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not accept comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Outside of our meetings, members of the public are always welcome to contact council members or provide comments or concerns on any matter via email at council@everettwa.gov or by calling the City Council office at 425-257-8703. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Mayor Franklin. Here. Councilmember Bader.
Excused.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely.
Here.
Councilmember Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Toohey.
Here.
President Stonecipher.
Here. I would like to call on Councilmember Murphy to read the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Council President. One moment here. The City Council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they have hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Toohey, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Council President. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of September 29th, 2021?
Councilmember Toohey moves the motion to accept the minutes.
Roberts, second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Abstain?
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. And good evening, Mayor Franklin, on this very stormy night. I've got lightning going on outside my house here.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. I hope my power stays on for the meeting. There's lightning here and thunder as well. Good evening, Council President, council members, and community. Just a little update on COVID. Although we're seeing a little bit of a downward shift in the numbers, I really want our residents to keep up the good safety measures because the hospitals are still at full capacity, and now we have flu season. So if you haven't had the opportunity to get your COVID vaccination, it's a great time to schedule that and get your flu shot as well. So just be safe, everybody, and I guess stay safe and dry tonight. Thank you. No further comment.
Thank you. And we will now go on to council member comments and liaison reports. We'll start with council member Moore.
Yes, you guys that live in the north end, actually in South Everett, it's sunny and mild, very warm breeze. Just kidding. No, I have no further comments tonight, but I just, yeah, no further comments.
Thank you. Council member Murphy.
No comments and no report. Thank you.
Thank you. Council member Vogely.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to report that Esther's Place, a daytime drop-in center for women in need, had their open house yesterday. It was well attended, and I am more than thrilled to see this type of service being welcomed into our community. It's on Broadway, by the way. And I also wish to remind everyone that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Abused individuals are 5 times more likely to be killed by their abuser if the abuser has access to a firearm. And just like any decision, a person suffering from domestic violence must make the decision to get help. If someone you know is suffering but not ready to leave, have patience, listen, and write down this number: 1-800-799-7233. Anonymous and confidential help can be found by calling 800-799-SAFE, S-A-F-E. Learn the warning signs and check in with your friends. It might save their life. You are not alone. That is all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. I just would give a brief sound transit report. And on Friday, the Sound Transit agency opened up Northgate with a lot of fanfare and 3 stations moving north from the UW. So that was very exciting. And of course, continuing to move north is Linwood, and that station is on schedule to open in 3 years in 2024. But for me, the most exciting news is that we are seriously standing up Everett Link. That is to say, the planning is now underway for the alignment and stations to get to Everett. It's been a long time coming, but it's just exciting to see that happen. And I know from working with our planning department, that work will be incorporated into the comprehensive plan. I'm sure we'll talk a little more about that later on Rethink Housing, but I do want to share what I consider to be really good news with my colleagues and with the community. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
Thank you, Council President. I have no report tonight, but I'm certainly happy to hear about Northgate opening up. So, yay, step closer. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any liaison report, but I do want to echo Mayor Franklin's comments. For those who don't know, the hospital, Providence Hospital today had to cancel all surgical cases as a result of the fact that they had over 40 people waiting in the hospital for a bed. And a good portion of those people were waiting for an ICU bed because they were sick with COVID. Somewhere around 97% of those who are being treated in our hospital for COVID-19 right now are unvaccinated. So I would also like to encourage those who have not had an opportunity to get their vaccine to please consider doing so as soon as possible. We must have good vaccine adherence in our community if we want our community to reopen and be anything near what we would consider normal again. So, and for the rest of you, stay well, do not get sick, because the hospital is not in a great position to help you if you are. With that, I would ask, is there anything to report from administration?
Thank you, Council President Stonecipher. Nick Harper, no administrative update this evening.
Thank you. City Attorney comments. Mr. Hall, do you have anything for us tonight?
Nothing to report and no executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb Williams, have we received any comments from the community for public comment this evening?
Good evening, President Stonecipher. I have received 3 written comments regarding item 9, Rethink Housing Action Plan. Those are George Newhall, Brian Partington of Everett, and Shola Bolandoro. These have all been provided to administration and the clerk to be part of the permanent record. I also have 3 individuals who are waiting to speak on item 9 when we get to that item. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Do I hear a motion to adopt the 3 consent items?
Roberts moves the consent agenda.
Vogely seconds.
We have a motion and a second on the consent agenda. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Toohey.
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. We have one item on our proposed action item list. Do council members have any questions on item number 4? If so, unmute yourself and make yourself known. Hearing none, we will move on to our action agenda. Item 5 is Council Bill 2109-33, the third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled Port of Everett Combined Sewer Main, Fund 336, Program 025. Do I hear a motion?
Murphy moves approval.
Roberts second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Let's see if we have any questions, starting with Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore, you're muted, I believe. Any questions on item 5?
Technical difficulties. Can you?
It wouldn't be the pandemic without them.
Yeah. No questions. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you. No questions and no comments on this item.
Councilmember Vogely.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Roberts.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Toohey.
No question.
Thank you. And I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
Councilmember Toohey.
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 6, Council Bill 2109-34, third and final reading. Adopt the proposed ordinance creating a special improvement project entitled WPCF Bar Screen Upgrades, Fund 336, Program 027. Do I hear a motion?
Roberts moves approval.
Do I hear a second?
Vogely seconds.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Let's see if we have any questions. Councilmember Moore.
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Murphy.
No questions, no comments. Thanks.
Councilmember Vogely,
None here. Thank you.
Councilmember Roberts,
No questions or comments, thanks.
Councilmember Tui,
That was a
Councilmember
pretty
Tui.
good frozen screen.
Councilmember Tui, any questions or comments?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was locked, I was bumped out, now I'm back. No questions or comments.
Thank you. And I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 7, Council Bill 2109-35. Third and final reading, adopt the proposed ordinance approving the appropriations of the 2021 revised City of Everett budget and amending ordinance number 3802-21. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Murphy seconds.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Let's see if we have council questions or comments. Councilmember Moore,
No questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Murphy,
No questions. Thanks.
Councilmember Vogely,
Looking forward to the new budget, but this amendment is okay.
Councilmember Roberts.
No questions. My only comment is to thank our budget staff for keeping us on track and doing such a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
No questions or comments, thank you.
And I have no questions or comments. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 8, authorize city staff to apply for, and if awarded, authorize the mayor to sign all necessary documents to accept the Washington State Department of Commerce grant to assist with the implementation of the Housing Action Plan in the amount of $100,000. Do I hear a motion?
So move, Roberts.
Vogely seconds.
Thank you. Let's see if there are questions or comments. Councilmember Moore,
No questions.
Councilmember Murphy,
No questions. Just good luck to staff on getting this grant. Thanks.
Councilmember Vogely.
I do actually have a question. When it comes to the in-kind hours, I imagine, but tell me if I'm wrong, that staff will be paid for the hours regardless. So it's not like they're doing extra work in order to be giving the in-kind money. Is that correct?
Good evening, Becky McCrary, planning staff. Yes, that is correct.
Well then, good luck, Godspeed.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
My only comment is that I know staff has been working really hard to get this, and that's why a little bit of a scramble to alert everyone that this was coming last week. So I just appreciate their effort, and I have no other comment.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. Just a couple, maybe one question here. So I see that this is for looking into different types of incentive recommendations for developers. And I just hope that when they come back that we're able to see the different cities that they're looking at to compare to see what other cities are doing as part of this. Would be important for me to know what other cities are doing. That was it.
Yes,
Thanks.
that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
All right. You bet.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Murphy,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. Item 9, adopt the resolution adopting the Rethink Housing Action Plan. We also received an errata sheet that was provided to us on September 30th. And before I ask for a motion, I believe we have a staff update, and I think that's going to be Yorick, Planning Director.
Yes, good evening, York Students
Good
Watch,
evening.
Planning Director. Thank you, President Stonecipher. Becky McCrary is going to handle this, and I kid you not, 10 seconds ago, one of my screens started jiggling, and it happened before, and I have to restart to get rid of that. But I think
I just saw lightning behind you. It was awesome.
So I think I can switch the screens. Becky, while I'm pulling this up, I think you can get started.
Yeah.
I think I have to switch the 2 screens and then show that one.
I actually might be able to bring it up myself if that would be easier.
Here we go. I got the screens to switch.
You got it. Well, good evening, Council. Tonight, we are here to present the final Rethink Housing Action Plan. And we've had a few developments since we were here in September. So we'd like to share that, just do a brief recap, and then I'll turn it back over to Yorick, and he will talk a little bit about implementation in more detail. So next slide. Brief recap, we actually started this last September in full force, and that was through the pandemic, and now we're here about a year later. As we know, the housing needs, we have both availability and affordability issues, growth pressures, and new growth to plan for. We're dealing with homelessness issues, which you're going to hear more about tonight from Julie Willie, and understanding displacement risks, especially as we become a transit, light rail transit community. And then we know that we had some Rethink zoning follow-up work that we wanted to incorporate into this plan, and then really make sure that we focus in on expanding equity opportunities. Just a little bit about the process. We received an initial grant from the Department of Commerce under HB 1923. The mayor appointed a housing committee, which worked with us throughout the process and have given their recommendation on the plan. We held community information forums. Those are available on our website about missing middle housing, about homelessness, and also about just how housing gets built development-wise. We held several community chat sessions. We were able to go to different civic groups and provide presentations and get some feedback that way. And then, of course, throughout the process, we've been making sure to keep Planning Commission and City Council briefed. Next slide. Some key findings that are important is that the current housing supply production is not meeting needs now and for our future growth. And that's in both the rental and the ownership type housing markets. Housing costs are continuing to rise. We really need to have an offering of a variety of housing types at all price points for the community. Renters here are proportionately experiencing more housing cost burden. And we do know that there are displacement risks throughout the city that we need to be paying attention to. Next slide. Just to remind you of the areas of focus in the Housing Action Plan, strategies around increasing housing variety, how we should help development of housing on urban corridors, transit-oriented communities, and strategies around affordability and displacement. Next slide. So I'll focus here a little bit on the changes since we came to you in September. So we've gone through the document again, made minor text edits and corrections. We also included the discussion of our final housing forum. We've been able, as Councilmember Roberts says, we've been in the throes of planning efforts with Sound Transit and Linwood and Snohomish County. We have added as per the Housing Committee's recommendation, an homeless housing action, and I know you'll hear more about that later. So that's been added to the plan. And then we have recommended, provided an amended council resolution to include strategies that we could advance that would support more home ownership, and that could be on both the market rate side as well as the affordability side. Next slide. So I did want to highlight the new action that's being proposed. We worked in coordination with the Community Development Division, and we're proposing this to be a short-term action, and you'll hear more about the timing of all of that, but that's like a 1 to 2 year type of a time frame. But really, this is suggesting that we coordinate an alleviating homelessness plan with community partners, so important. And that would be to address current and future needs of unsheltered community members, and also to think about what we can do in terms of prevention strategies. As you might imagine, the program would need to identify the resource needs, special population needs, and come up with a realistic implementation plan. We'd want to evaluate permanent and temporary homeless housing solutions. So taking a look at opportunities, innovation, and best practices. And then with that, including nonprofit housing and service providers to support new supportive housing projects like Claire's Place for the chronically homeless population. Next slide. So this is where I'm going to turn it over to Yorick.
Yeah. So being an action plan, of course, implementation is going to be the most important part of this. There are a lot of actions in the plan. They're presented in a few different ways. But I thought the list of key implementation steps that's in the executive summary on page 3 III provides a helpful organization for tonight's discussion. So I'll just very briefly cover those 10 general buckets, and then talk about a few related pieces of work that are underway or upcoming, one of which you just took action on before this item. And then without further ado, turn to the council for your questions and discussion. The first kind of bucket of actions in this list is huge and an impactful piece of work, and it needs to be done carefully and with full participation by the Everett community. Revising our development regulations includes varied actions from encouraging accessory dwelling units to expanding housing choices throughout the city to streamlining regulations and dialing back some of those that aren't adding as much value as we had hoped, to carefully managing transitions between districts and corridors with higher activity levels to quieter areas, and more. So this is one of the most impactful and important sets of actions. The work will be most effective and efficient. So I'm responding a little bit. Councilmember Roberts had some questions about how exactly we are planning on implementing this plan, and there is an implementation chapter, but there are some more details to put to this. So revising the development regulations was most effective and efficient when it's incorporated into the upcoming comprehensive plan periodic update that will be kicking off in January, most likely, and lasting through mid-2024. There's somewhat of an economy of scale with that because we're already doing outreach, communication with the community, environmental analysis, and looking at the bigger picture. So it's a great time to take on a lot of these actions, and you'll see quite a few of them do mention incorporation into the comprehensive plan periodic update. The downside of that is that the plan and its associated development regulations won't be effective until mid-2024, and there are some of these actions that we'd like to tackle earlier than that. So we will look at, it's going to be hard for a long-range planning division with limited capacity to tackle both a major periodic update, advancing our planning period by 10 years and accommodating another large increment of growth, while at the same time taking on some of these action steps. But we will look for bits to bite off prior to 2024. And one ongoing project that we're working on to refine Rethink zoning, the major overhaul to our development regulations that was adopted about a year ago. We're catching some inconsistencies and polishing up some of those provisions. And that We weren't thinking so much that that would be a major policy exercise, more clarification and consistency, but it does offer some opportunity for some targeted policy changes that we would coordinate with you, the council, as we went. Revising the design guidelines is pretty similar to the development regulations. That's going to be a crucial piece to building and maintaining community support for housing development and also just to keep Everett beautiful. I mentioned updating the comprehensive plan, a massive piece of work mandated by the state, and an exciting project that you'll be hearing a lot more, maybe too much in the coming years. Improving local non-motorized transportation infrastructure and other amenities. I would probably look mainly to my colleagues in the Public Works Department to help with implementation of this. It also fits well within the comprehensive plan update, but you also regularly review and revise your capital facilities programming and budgeting. The coordinating a development incentive study. This might be record speed for launching from an action plan to actual implementation, as that's the subject of the grant application that you just approved in the previous item. So we, if successful, would go out for consultant support to review all of the development incentives that we currently have, multifamily tax exemption, height and density bonuses for affordable housing and other policy goals, fee waivers and partial waivers, things like that. And we would review all of those incentives that we offer and make sure that they are getting the best policy and housing bang for the incentive buck. Developing a parking study and adjusting minimum parking standards. So this is anything that involves kind of a detailed technical study might be a good candidate for seeking additional grant funds. We're looking forward to the next legislative session. There's been a lot of opportunities for grants that came out of the last session, and we'll keep our eye out for that. Assisting tenants and homeowners with housing costs and protections. That's something that we'll work closely with the council and with the mayor on a timeline for and a strategy for taking a look at some of those actions. You'll hear more about coordinating that program for housing unsheltered members of the community later in your agenda today, and Becky touched on it a moment ago. Developing a long-term affordable housing funding strategy. I see that as well as the monitoring program is probably having the best effectiveness when coordinated regionally with our partners. And that can either be within Snohomish County through Snohomish County Tomorrow or the Alliance for Housing Affordability or the Puget Sound Regional Council. There's again a great economy of scale and a lot of value in coordination on that. Three exciting projects that we're embarking on or already embarking on. I mentioned the Housing Action Plan and Implementation Grant, studying the existing incentives and developing recommendations for updates to those. That work would take place in 2022 for successful. There is we just had a meeting with the consultant team that is working on, this was a grant funded project by the legislature that will be kicking off shortly through the middle of next year. And Sound Communities is the consultant group that's working on this, along with Everett, Renton, and Tacoma. And the outcome of this project will be a handbook for strategies for land acquisition and assembly, focused especially on transit station areas. So how can we make sure that some of the land around those station areas that looks to see a big increase in value as the light rail line moves north, how can we make sure that some of that land and some of that value is available for lower income and members of the community that are already there, limiting displacement and making sure that the benefits of that transit expansion are shared equitably. A station area knowledge base will be just what it sounds like, a knowledge base of information to help us make our decisions and do sub-area planning around those stations. And then the Model Code Partnership is a Federal Transit Administration grant that we're working on with Sound Transit and other partners to look at our policies and regulations, conduct a gap analysis, look at some case studies of other areas around the nation and the world that have done a good job with their planning around station areas, and then recommend and develop model codes. And that work will be ongoing through the next couple of years. Then there's also at the regional level, Puget Sound Regional Council is wrapping up a regional housing action plan that will look like ours, but at a regional level that will have other good strategies and an implementation plan for housing. The same struggles that we have here are shared throughout the region. The Snohomish County tomorrow will be commissioning a county-wide housing needs analysis that's related to that regional partnership on monitoring. That will inform our comprehensive plan update. And then we're always looking at the state legislature to help support cities like us in our housing work through grants and policy changes. And we'll be following the legislative session coming up in a couple months here. And then the recently completed Snohomish County Housing Affordability Regional Task Force had another list of great action items, and we hope to see some regional coordination on implementation of those. So wrapping this up, we have recommendations from the Rethink Housing Action Plan Advisory Committee, recommended approval on June 3rd. They added 2 notes. The suggestion to add language addressing homelessness, which Becky covered earlier in this presentation, and then also to consider resources for implementation, especially at the city level, because it's a lot of work and there's only a couple of us on the long range planning team. The Planning Commission recently recommended approval on August 17th, and staff recommends approval of the revised council resolution that is in your packet this evening. So thank you for bearing with us on this last presentation, and I will turn it back to you, President Stonecipher, for council questions and discussion.
Great. Well, first, thank you very much for, I know this has been a lot of work, and York, I know you kind of came in sort of midstream, and so thank you very much for all your work. And Becky, and I know there's a ton of people in the planning department that have been working on this, as well as the rest of administration and other departments. At this point, I'll go down the council roll to see what questions and comments we have initially, and we can circle back if there are additional questions as well. We will start tonight with Councilmember Moore.
Yes, thank you, Becky and Yorick. Very thorough presentation. I really don't have a question at this point in time. I will listen to my colleagues, and if I do, I'll ask at a later point, but thank you for a very thorough presentation.
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Council President. A few items. First, I really want to thank the Rethink Housing Action Plan Advisory Committee, as well as the Planning Commission, for their work on this process over the past year or two. And as well, just want to call out big thanks to all the staff, Yorick, Becky, and others I know who worked very hard on this project. This is obviously a very important project for Everett. You know, it's important because if we can crack the code of how we would offer more types of housing across the spectrum, whether it be multifamily, single family, whether it is low income, affordable, market rate, across all those spectrums, this is what can lead us to have a more healthy, vibrant, and growing community. And the growth is happening, but you know, obviously it's happening at a time when housing stock and housing supply is not keeping up with that demand. And so if we can figure out how to, again, crack this code and make this housing at all levels and in all spectrums more available, that's really going to make us a more attractive community in the region. So really appreciate all the hard work on this. Just want to call out again the addition recently in the last few days on putting in some strategies to try to help with home ownership. I think we're all fairly well familiar with the fact that Everett as a city has just about the lowest home ownership statistics across the county. There may be only 1 or 2 in the county, might be Darrington, I think, but I may have that wrong, that actually has a lower home ownership percentage than the city of Everett. So really figuring out a way to include encouraging home ownership in Everett, I think is a big win. And I know I spoke with the mayor on this topic one-on-one a couple weeks ago. And so, Mayor, I really appreciate your support on that and willingness to work with staff to get that included here in this final draft. So again, thanks Mayor, thanks staff, and for all the volunteer work at the advisory committee level as well as the planning commission. That's all I have. Very, very happy to support this moving forward. Thanks again.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Yes, thank you. This has been a long time coming and super awesome. I have pages of notes, but I'm not going to go through all of them. I do want to make a couple comments, like marginal increases in density are likely to be a longer term approach to densification in most neighborhoods. That's, I think, going to possibly alleviate a little bit of fear from the single family household zones that may be quite apprehensive about having more housing in our city. I thought that it was interesting. I think it was in something that you added this last round. No, never mind. 56% of our population are homeowners. And then I thought, oh, well, isn't that interesting, considering that 80% of our land is relegated to single family housing. So that's kind of disproportionate. And just reading everything about displacement possibilities and evictions that are coming up. They've always been a thing, but they're definitely more of a thing now. Accessibility issues, like at certain places that I've been to lately, black mold and unhealthy affordable housing. I know that we want more home ownership, but I'm wondering, and I didn't pass this by anybody yet, so I apologize. I'm wondering if we could amend the resolution, since it's just a resolution, if we could amend it to add a rental property registry opportunity. It's not a we're going to make this happen, but it's a we could make this happen, and it could be part of the housing action plan scenario. I'd probably need a second. I don't have it all written out, and I think since it's a resolution, it could be done. So let me know if I'm wrong, and let me know if somebody else would like to go in on that with me. Paul?
Okay.
Stone Cipher? Nick has an idea. Can't vote, but has his hand up. I don't even know if it's a possibility.
Does administration have a response to this, Nick?
I don't have a specific response, Council President, other than, rather than amending the resolution, if there was some type of a verbal colloquy on the record of council members' intent for what they would like to see. This is all obviously just a guiding policy document that's going to inform future council decisions. So none of this is binding to the extent that nothing's being adopted tonight, other than, I think, the aspiration of moving forward in a direction that is generally emblematic of the document before you. So I don't know that a formal amendment is necessary, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I think I'm not familiar with the housing or a rental registry, and I think that is something that sounds like we would need some time and direction to discuss that before we would adopt something, but that certainly is something that we could ask and work with administration to bring forward at a future date.
Okay, so it can't like get in for just, it's a resolution. Okay, I can let it go, but I am going to bring it up again, and I do want to see us work on that. So Mr. Harper mentioned something with the word colloquial in it. So if we could get a colloquial something or other, that'd be cool. you can think about it. We're going to go around again. And I also wanted to bring up parking, and there's just so much I like about this. You know, we've been reading the Guide to Affordable Housing. That's not the name of the book, but there's so many things that can be implemented, and really having, you know, the community's input right now and within the next year, and just get all of these things really in order and moving forward, and it will just help us immensely in the housing market area. So that's all I'll say for now. Thank you so much for all of your work, everybody.
Thank you. We'll move to Councilmember Roberts. Questions. We do have 3 citizens or residents waiting to speak as well, but we're gonna go through the council questions first.
So, Councilman President Stonecipher, thank you. I don't have questions at this point. I have comments, and when it's appropriate to make the resolution, to move the resolution, I will make those comments at that time. I would just mention that well, I'll just hold my comments until that point, because I do want to walk through some things, but I certainly do want to thank our Housing Action Plan Advisory Committee, our planning staff, and all who, the citizens and all who have been involved in a very, very long and complex and thorough process. And I'll come back to make comments later. And then I would like to make a motion to approve this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Toohey.
Yeah, I don't have any specific questions, but I do have comments, and I will wait till we come back around. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And for myself, I do have a few questions. First of all, one thing I noticed is there was a complete absence of any discussion about historic preservation and the desire to provide incentives or preserve historic structures. We've had many instances in our community where we have great historic buildings that have been torn down in favor of new construction. And I just was wondering, how does this plan or this document sync with our goals on historic preservation in the community?
So I would say that the action plan didn't specifically mention it because we do have a pretty robust historic preservation code and overlay and design guidelines, and so those would still apply. So we didn't tackle that particular subject in the housing action plan.
Okay, thank you. And then there was an area where transitional zones were discussed, which I think is a good plan. And it just kind of mentioned that sidewalks, bike routes, and parks should be considered sort of in those transitional areas and in the neighborhoods there, kind of to help sort of blunt the impact of greater development for everyone who lives in the area. And then it sounded like there was some great suggestions about step backs on the upper floors and those other kinds of measures, which I know we've implemented in the past. I'm just curious, how does that come forward as future regulations? I mean, would those be prescriptive that, you know, there has to be so much park space in a certain area? Is that, or, you know, sidewalks have to be implemented in transition zones before that kind of density can be accommodated? Because I think having been on council for a long time and been involved in city government before as well, my experience has been that we have a lot of good ideas for how those things can happen and how we can make neighborhoods more walkable and provide more parks. But if they're not prescriptive, it always becomes something that we're kind of promising will happen at a future date, and then it never does. So I'm just curious how do those pieces of how do those ideas actually come forward in something that is truly actionable.
Eric, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I heard it.
I can take it.
I heard it. Yeah, a couple of different ones. One is the transition between higher intensity areas, say along Evergreen Way, is already planned for pretty significant development, and sometimes you have some low density neighborhoods right adjacent to them. So those are in that bucket of development regulations changes that we would look at again, potentially through the comprehensive plan, potentially earlier, and look at things like carefully stepping down. There's some architectural examples in the housing action plan for how to require that maybe the back sides of larger buildings relate to the homes on the other side of an alley or on the other side of a block there. So that would be part of the development regulations. And then the other piece about the amenities and the sidewalks and the street trees and all that, those also are in the development regulations. We require when a development happens that the sidewalks and the frontage zone be brought up to standards to the extent that that's already improving our areas of the city piece by piece as development happens. Street trees go in, sidewalks go in, curbs and gutters where they didn't exist before. Some of the actions might be to review those. We've seen, we now had those under our belt for a little bit, and we can see if that's achieving what we were hoping it was to achieve, and work with that a little bit if not. And finally, the Parks Department is going through an effort right now to update the park recreation and open space plan, the park element, and their list of capital projects. And that includes a focus on adding green space to areas that lack it currently, upgrading paths and bikeways and such. So those are sort of some of those amenity areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Becky,
and I know the park impact fee is also on the up for consideration, for council's consideration coming up. So I guess I'm hoping that when this comes back, whether this is part of the comprehensive plan, that it is not just aspirational but actionable, so that we can hold ourselves accountable to making those kinds of improvements as we get some growth going in our community. And then I wanted to ask a little bit about the design guidelines. I know that it's talking about a revision to some of the design guidelines. How are you envisioning that will play out? I mean, are we thinking, there's always been a question as to whether we should have a design review committee. There've been too many examples of times when our design guidelines are met, but that isn't meeting our community's expectations. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect between what our design guidelines require and what our community would, I think, how that plays out, in certain developments. And that it's certainly not always been the case, but there've been enough cases that I think there's been in some instances, a loss of trust in our ability to hold the developers accountable for good design, and knowing that a lot of times design is just, it doesn't cost anymore to have good design. It's just, it has to be the expectation. How are you thinking that we would move forward with a revision to the design guidelines? Would you be considering a design review committee? Or how are we thinking of that?
Becky, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, I was just going to say, we had heard this, I think once or twice during our outreach efforts too, from some members of the public. And so I think I'll let Yorick weigh in obviously, but the one thing we would want to be cautious about as well is adding time to development, process to development. And that is sometimes what happens on a design review board scenario. So, but it's certainly something that we heard, and that we should at least take a look at whether it would be right or not. And yeah. Yorick, I'll let you
Yeah, I think
take that one.
I understand that our goal has been to avoid the process, the time and the cost of a individual design review actions with development. So instead we build those standards into our development regulations. I think we did a lot of work with that with Rethink zoning. I'm not as familiar with how the code read before that, but I know there are a lot of new standards that I've heard our land use team working with interpreting, and I think you'll see some of those developments happen in the next couple of years, and we can let the jury decide if that is meeting our needs or not. It's things like requiring certain transparency standards on the ground floor, prohibiting blank walls, long 100-foot long walls that are just a wall. So you need to have architectural treatments, landscaping, and whatnot. Vertical and horizontal modulation. It's been a crash course in architecture these last couple of months because we review these developments, we try to interpret pieces of the code, do the back and forth with developers, and ultimately try to get the best deal for the city while making sure that any requirements are truly adding value, because oftentimes they do add cost, if nothing else, for the architects to go back and revise a design or something like that. So I think, a couple parts to it is, one is getting comfortable with the new design guidelines that we have now. Two, hate to punt everything to the comprehensive plan, but we have an urban design element in the comprehensive plan that gives somewhat of a narrative of what we are looking for. That was last updated in 2015, and so we would love to hear from you and anyone else on what are those important pieces of character, because that's what I look to if there's ambiguity in the code as to whether we should stick hard and fast with something or not. So continuous improvement and continuous attention to how the code is being used. And we've had some ideas from our land use staff on, hey, this provision is in there. Everybody always wants to modify it. We can't tell if it's adding value, and so would probably recommend changing that.
Okay. And then my last question or comment has to do with the resolution as it was recently revised to address the question of plans and strategies that will help increase home ownership. And I know this can be a little bit, it feels controversial to some who are advocates of affordable housing. I think, part of I think that missing middle is, and if you looked at the survey results, the #1 housing type that our community said in surveys that is needed in Everett is single family residential housing. So I find that kind of fascinating when we think that we have, some in our community would say that we have more than enough of that. But the question really has to do with having people actually have ownership in our community. And I think that in some ways that creates a stability within the community. And it also, when people own their property, they just care for it in a different way than, you just don't go out and weed the gardens often in a rental property, or fewer people do. So there's just a sense, I think, of more permanence and investment in the community. And I think that helps make our neighborhoods a lot stronger. I would just point out that in the United States, 50% of people are homeowners, and we're at 45% or less. And so I'm curious, what kinds of strategies do you see? I mean, obviously, if we can reduce the increase in housing prices by creating more affordable housing options, that's helpful. But what kinds of other strategies do you see us implementing to help people buy some of those, great starter homes that we have in our community that need a little TLC and some elbow grease?
Did you want to start yours?
Yeah, I'll start on this. We can trade off on here. So there are a number of strategies. So in the back of the action plan, there's a matrix that, or maybe it's one of the appendices. There's a matrix, and there's half moons and full moons that show which strategies address different policy goals. And there's about 10 that that address the home ownership one. It's tricky in a city like ours that where most of our development capacity is going to be in multifamily and duplexes, triplexes, townhouses. It's a little bit harder to get home ownership with that product, at least while we're still having troubles with the condo market. That's probably one of the easiest routes into it with multifamily development and some of those others. But I think many are well aware of the struggles that our state has had developing a robust condo market and development style. Some of the other ones include direct financial assistance for homeowners, so support for first-time mortgages, community land trusts, and some more innovative strategies to reduce that upfront cost of home ownership. What was the other one? We have ongoing programs to help folks stay in their homes. What's that one called? It's right down the hallway from me, but it's a CHIP. That's it. Community Housing Improvement Program. So there are some strategies in here. I will say it's a challenge, and that's why I think we've been asked to highlight that for some follow-up work. And as stated in the resolution, we will be directed to do so by the council, and we'll take that on and keep working on it.
Well, I think and one of the things I was glad to hear that you are going to be evaluating the development incentives. And I really hope that when those come back, I'd like to see some metrics on their usage and, kind of if we can quantify the value that has had in our community, I think that would be helpful. But I always wonder, is there any opportunity for a development incentive for someone who, for example, buys sort of a home that requires a lot of work in our community, and would we have the ability to provide a tax incentive for redevelopment of some of our single family residential neighborhoods that, we've got a lot of homes in there that we know are, they're rentals, they've been used as drug houses. I mean, every neighborhood can point out probably a half dozen homes in their neighborhood that they wish someone would buy and fix up. So I'd be really curious to see if you could bring back any ideas for how we can incentivize someone to buy those and have a owner occupied residence there and provide some incentive to help defray the cost of them renovating that home and being able to purchase it and live in it, just not for speculation or for an investment, but actual owner occupied options. So I would love to hear about that as you come back with that report on the development incentives. I think that's all the questions I have for now. Let's have our residents who are waiting to speak to us at this time, and then we'll go back through, we'll have a motion, and then we'll go back through and have other discussion from council.
Thank you, President Stonecipher. I did have 3 community members. I now have 2 community members wishing to speak. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you're able. Please begin by giving your name and your city of residence, and please remember to limit your comments to 3 minutes. At 30 seconds, I will ask you to begin to wrap up. Mr. Sluter, please go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor Franklin, members of the council. I'm Dylan Sluter. I'm the Snohomish County Manager at the Master Builders Association. We previously provided some comments, and we just wanted to again reiterate that we're grateful for the city taking on this proposal and this action plan, and we look forward to being a part of the implementation of it. We're extremely excited to see some of the options to increase the variety of homes at all price points, and this includes missing middle pieces such as duplexes, townhomes, ADUs, and other types of housing across the spectrum, which includes single family homes as well. I think the large piece tonight that I want to focus on was the inclusion of the home ownership opportunities that Everett really needs to focus on and is struggling with right now. And we applaud the inclusion of that. The incentives and changes to development regulations to promote such thing is something that can hopefully move Everett in the right direction. Ownership itself provides stability. It brings investment into the community, and it brings economic security. It oftentimes is the largest form of equity building and wealth building that someone can have. So ownership is definitely a key part of the success and vitality of Everett and its residents and future residents. As missing middle goes, obviously it's missing. That's why it's such a struggle right now. And these types of options and units would provide that sort of transition between a rental and a single family home per se, that's oftentimes not available for folks like myself. I myself am a renter, even though I represent the building industry, because I can't afford a home. So I'm renting a condo. And right now that's all I can afford. And honestly, if Everett would allow more housing types at an attainable rate, that Everett would be a place I could look to live. But right now, the types of housing I would like to live in at an affordable price just isn't available. Again, we want to keep Everett an attractive and successful place. We look forward to working with the city as it goes forward with implementation of the Housing Action Plan, and we encourage you to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Again, I want to remind you, please remember to unmute yourself and please turn on your camera if you're able. Please begin by giving your name and your city of residence. Mr. Mohammed, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Ishmael Mohammed. I'm resident of Woodinville, Washington, but I do have businesses in Everett for last almost 25 years. And I'm well invested in building the housing in Everett. Several of my properties are there. And I've been working last 3 years since the Metro Everett was being planned and Rethink zoning was planned. And now again, the housing plan that we are working on. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I think the planning department and the long range managers are working excellent. The new housing initiative that I see has incorporated many of the missing pieces from Metro and from the first Rethink zoning. I can say that when Mayor Franklin did directive for 3 things, and one of them to invite the developers to have a friendly city. And I think that area has been very much focused on and is giving some positive output to the investors, to the developers to come into the area and invest in Everett. But still, I think there is a lot to be invested in that area of, I think the city's budget should include some funding for expedited processing of permitting that planning or permit services can utilize those funds, you know. I would also suggest that we should look into some best practices around other cities in the area. I've talked to builders in Tacoma, and their permits are processed in 2 to 3 months, whereas in Everett, probably it takes 6 to 8 or a year maybe, you know. I can understand there are challenges, COVID challenges, but now I think we need to get back on track. Every time we talk about R1, R2 zones and multifamily, the code does not define multifamily unless it's 5 units or above. So
30 seconds.
Below the 5 units, it's only a dwelling, and the parking requirements are very extensive if you have less than 5 units. So that might be considered. All of my projects are in the middle housing range, except one. And I do really appreciate planning director and long range planning, Becky's help. Every time I've reached out, they are always available, and I want to thank you. And hopefully in the next year or two, I should be able to produce at least 40 to 50 units.
Thank you very much for your comments. We sure appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Stonecipher, those are all I have wishing to speak this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adopt the resolution.
Roberts moves the adoption and includes the errata sheet and the technical amendments that were provided in the resolution.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
4 seconds.
We have a motion and a second, and that I want to just confirm, is that the amended resolution that we received today?
That is correct.
Thank
And
you.
the second is also correct. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We'll go down the roll again for final comments and questions, starting with Councilmember Moore.
No, I just appreciate the rich dialogue. Very helpful. Thank you to my colleagues and to the city staff.
Thank you. Councilmember Murphy.
Yeah, ditto what Councilmember Moore said. Great dialogue, and really excited to sort of move this along and celebrate this milestone. I think we're ending up with a plan that is going to be much more balanced and hopefully lead to a lot of good things for our housing options in our community. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Yes, of course. Thanks again. I wanted to bring up that the earlier thing that we just accepted or allowed you to sign, Mayor, the $100,000 for implementation of the Housing Action Plan. I'm sure that can go towards trying to figure out just what action we're going to take. I know President Stonecipher had asked Mr. Stevens-Wajda and Becky about, well, what are we going to do? Well, we get to write some ordinances now. And I think that isn't all put on staff. I think that some of that is put on us as council members because, well, that's what we do, right? I don't think we have really much of that done yet, but that's what we're supposed to do. I've mentioned it before. So yes, writing ordinances, making sure that the people are having their say. Let's see, rentals. I didn't feel like there was much of a dialogue actually tonight, but a lot of good things were said. Rentals are owned by landlords. Landlords are responsible for the upkeep of their property. There's a Landlord Tenant Act. It's RCW 59.18.060. And there are a significant amount of landlords who take good care of their property, fantastic care of their property, and they take care of their tenants. And then there are those that don't. And I know that we've received some emails from folks who have posted some YouTube videos about the atrocities of their rental place. I know that I've been to some apartments and the accessibility is slim to none. I know that in some places roaches come up out of the not sewer, but just like the bathroom when you're doing the laundry, or you only get to do laundry between 9 and 5. So good luck getting your laundry done on the weekend. So all of these things we could do something about, and we could do something about them after we approve the Housing Action Plan. I am looking very much forward to approving the Housing Action Plan. I'm sure it will be unanimous. So I just, and then I also wanted to say thank you to Mr. Muhammad, because I think I remember meeting him at a historical commission meeting, and he does have some good product in our city. So thank you. So just remember, everybody, that we've got some work to do, and it is not our job to just have Becky and Yorick spoon feed us the things that need to happen. We need to get in there and do some work too. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
Well, thanks, President Stonecipher. And I said I had some comments, and now is the time to bring them forward. As the liaison to planning and community development, I've had the good fortune to work and have a number of meetings actually with Yorick and with the staff. And I can just tell you that they are doing some extremely heavy lifting. Our folks are really, and I think this plan shows that they are engaged on a number of levels to address the needs of this community. And so again, I thank them. I thank the Housing Action Advisory Committee and the community. This council had said that we really wanted to address housing at least as early as 2019. And now what we have is the policy document. And I had asked Yorick if he and staff would walk us through what the implementing pieces looked like. And he did that tonight. And Yorick and Rebecca, thank you so much for doing that. Clearly, the comp plan is a big piece of business that will incorporate a lot of the elements. The Uniform Development Code will get into a great many details. The non-motorized piece is important. And what wasn't mentioned is also the integration of the Climate Action Plan, which, while referenced in Rethink Housing, I know that didn't get addressed tonight, but the non-motorized piece is part of that. Development incentives and so on. I very much appreciate President Stonecipher's questions with regard to design standards. That is something that we've sort of struggled with or tried to get right for a number of years. And my hope is that we can do that by building them into the package. The funding strategies, the action that we took earlier authorizes the application for the grant. That's exactly, it is targeted to do exactly that. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we'll get that grant, and that will help us develop more strategies. So what is next is the implementation elements. They say the devil's in the details, and we've got a lot of details that we have to address. So I just am excited to see us at this point, because we as a council and as a city have wanted to be here. I think we're here. And now the hard work comes in developing these ordinances and implementing measures. So my hat's off to the staff. Thank you so much. Know that we're prepared to do this work with you. And that's all I have. I recommend, and I'm excited to recommend the approval. I think we're going to hopefully vote on it unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Toohey.
Thank you, Council President. Well, I appreciate all the council comments, and I just want to thank Becky and Yorick for, this is just as I looked through it and began studying it and reading it, is just very involved, and it just was a tremendous workload for you guys, and I just think it's great. I really appreciate your recommendations with the short-term, mid-term, and long-term action plans. For me, that's how I like to look at things, and so it made so much sense and really clarified that. So now I know what to expect and when it's going to come down the line. So I think the way you laid out all your findings and conclusions was, for me, it was great, very readable, and I really appreciate it. So look forward to having everything come back and get things finalized. And thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you. I don't have any other comments or questions other than just to echo thanks to all who have put in good hard work on this, including volunteers in our community and our professional staff. So thank you very much. I think with that, we have a motion and a second. We've all said our piece. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore.
Yes, I'm sorry, I had no more questions.
Councilmember Murphy.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Tui,
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes.
I just want to apologize. I was looking at a test. I got distracted, but thank you.
Thank you. Oh, good work. I hope the planning department will rest well tonight, having accomplished quite a big task. We're now going to move on to our council briefing agenda. These items come before the city council serving as a council committee of the whole and are likely to be scheduled at a future meeting. Item 10, adopt resolution concerning the 2022 human needs priorities and reallocations of Cdbg Cv funds. Action is scheduled for October 13th. And I believe we have Julie Willie here to start us off, or is it Becky?
Julie Willie here, Community
Hi,
Development
Julie.
Director. Good evening. Tonight, I would just like to welcome and introduce Kember Landry. She's here today in her brand new role as the Community Development Manager, which is a reclassification of her position. And Kember brings just great expertise, and we're just so excited to have her leadership in this department. And so I just want to pass it off to her for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you to Council President Stonecipher. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just give me a quick second and I will share my screen because I have a presentation ready. So. Okay, I believe that this is now sharing. So again, my name is Kember Landry. I'm the Community Development Manager with the city's Community Development Division, and I am here to present the Citizen Advisory Committee's recommendation for human needs and the priority needs for the 2022 Human Needs Program Year and reallocations for the city's Community Development Block Grant COVID funds. So first, we're going to discuss the 2022 Human Needs Priorities. This is something that's presented in a resolution. Each year, the city allocates $3 per capita for grants to nonprofit organizations providing services to Everett residents. Since 2016, an additional $1 per capita has been included for projects focused on safe streets priorities. Community priorities are established annually through public process and a public hearing held by the Citizen Advisory Committee. And recommendations of the annual priorities are brought forth to City Council for review and action. The list of priorities is available listed on the screen as well as also in the resolution. Priorities are also posted online on the city's website, circulated through the Community Development Newsflash, and posted on the Herald. Priority needs, as you can see, continue to focus on housing, homelessness, and services specifically related to mental health and employment. Some of the housing activities that we're looking to support are creation of new units, housing financial assistance, housing rehabilitation, and legal aid for housing mediation. And some of the homelessness services that we're looking to support or efforts are homeless health, mental health, substance use and other support services, homeless housing and emergency shelter, and homeless food services. So staff is requesting action from council through the adoption of the resolution of priority needs. And following adoption of the resolution, the application period will open for agencies interested in human needs funds. I would like to add that action is currently scheduled for the next city council meeting on October 13th. And I also just want to add real quick in here that human needs continue to be our most competitive funding source. And so looking forward to increasing the funding pool, something similar to the $1 increase per capita in 2016 would go a long way to addressing community needs. The last 18 months have brought forth significant aid to the city and community partners specific to COVID impacts and pandemic recovery. However, we have yet to see and understand the underlying impacts to housing, homelessness, and basic human services within our community. Human needs funds are highly sought after by community partners, primarily because they support human services in a way that our other funding sources simply cannot. Increase of these funds would have a significant impact in assisting agencies in addressing ongoing needs and services, as well as sustaining a community network that directly supports the priority needs that I have brought forth today. So with that, I will then move on to the next item. And that is the Cdbg Cv Reallocations. So HUD has awarded about 1.3 million in Cdbg Cv or COVID response funds to the city of Everett. And those were through the 2 grant awards that are listed on the screen. The CV1 award of about $500,000 and the CV3 award of about $789,000. Due to urgent need, the city also allocated an additional $500,000 of 2019 program year funds to the CV1 award, and that created a total of about $1.8 million for Cdbg COVID response. In April 2021, City Council approved the award allocations for the CV3 awards. At that time, we had approximately $348,000 that remained, and that was to be reallocated at a later date. And following the closeout of the CV1 allocations in May, we had about $45,000 that remain unused from CV1 awards. To facilitate timely spending in accordance with the city's agreement with HUD, it is therefore recommended to distribute the remaining funds to previously awarded CV1 and CV3 applicants. And projects for COVID respond directly to COVID impacts that are related to housing and food insecurity. So next steps are, again, that we will be bringing this forth to City Council for action on the meeting on the 13th of October. And immediately following, we'll be opening the application round for the 2022 Human Needs Funds. I also want to say that Human Needs award recommendations for the 2022 program year will come forth to City Council for briefing and action through the form of another resolution at a later date. And at this time, I will stop sharing and open it up for questions.
All right, thank you so much, Kembra, and congratulations on your new role. We'll go down the roll and see what council members have questions, starting with Council Member Moore.
Thank you for the presentation. No questions, no comments.
Thank you, Council Member Murphy.
Thank you. Hi, Kembra. Congratulations. Appreciate the presentation. A question on the carry forward dollars, or I guess the roughly $93,000 of funds left over. I just want to make sure I understand what you said towards the end. Is it that those funds will get reallocated to previous applicants from the 2021 round, or would those funds be carried forward into 2022 and be subject to allocation to future applicants? And so I just want to be sure I understand how that works mechanically.
Great question. The amount that you've seen, that 393,000 approximately, that is actually currently the reallocations. That was reallocated into the resolution that is in front of you. So that money was split proportionally to previous awardees and just distributed among projects that have already gone through vetting, public process, and previous award approval through City Council. That was something that was discussed and recommended with HUD staff. The Cdbg Cv funds were funds that if we did not commit them by a certain date, we would lose them. So we wanted to recommit them to projects that were already ongoing and to help augment the efforts that are currently in the community.
Okay, that's helpful. And I assume this will come forward. I don't think I saw it in my packet tonight. Maybe I missed it, but I would like to see how those dollars were being reallocated then, and a specific listing of which organizations received what in not only the previous rounds, but as well as this reallocation. I think that would really be helpful for us to see that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All I have.
Thank you, Councilmember Vogely.
Thank you, Kembra and all. Are we is the question that Councilmember Murphy just asked on page 4 in our packet, because I'm seeing Child's Drive, Volunteers of America, that CDBG Cv funds. So yeah, I think it's in here, but yeah, and I also, that was weird seeing that money for 2019 is being paid now. And I know that Councilmember Murphy had the same, I think we had the same kind of understanding. So go through that one more time. There was a slide with money that's going to 2019 and we're 2021. And even though those, I am sure that the people that got the money need it. So I don't have any problems. I just don't understand how that can be.
Yeah, another really good question. So the 2019 funds that were added to the CV1 award were actually allocated last year through the Small Business Cares program, as well as the Everett Cares Public Service program. Out of the many businesses that received aid through that, as well as the public services that we worked with on rental housing or rental assistance, as well as food security, we had about $45,000 that came out of the essentially $1,034,121 that was given in the first round of COVID money. And so the remaining $45,000 is remaining from that 1 million pool that was given in the previous CV1 round through the Everett Cares programs. And so we are putting that back into this amount to reallocate for current expenditures for public service agencies. So.
Thank you. Sorry for making you explain it twice.
No, it's a great question.
Okay, and then just to be clear, I see that you have a new job title, and none of this type of money goes towards that. And this is probably a budget question, and I don't really expect you, Kember, to be able to answer, but I was just curious about budget and staffing and how people get moved up and about. But this is CDBG stuff, not FTE stuff. Just kind of more of a comment, not really a question. Now you know what I've been thinking. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Councilmember Vogely, just so you know, her position was reclassified. It wasn't a promotion up, it was a promotion over to better articulate what her position is.
Thank you, because I don't really know. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing regardless. But thank you, Julie.
Thank you. And we'll move to Councilmember Roberts.
Thank you. Kember, congratulations. Good to see you. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciated the dialogue and the questions. So I don't know that I have any other questions, but I would say that given the growing disparity between incomes and housing, I do appreciate continued focus on housing as a priority. So, and obviously we just took a major policy move in that direction as well. So thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. And Councilmember Toohey.
Thank you, Council President. Kember, thank you so much for that great presentation. I just want to say these are tremendously needed funds, and we just wish our community that we had like 3 times as much or more and to give out to these great organizations. And thank you for your work. Thanks. That's all.
Great, thank you. And the question I have has to do with the Cdbg Cv administration amount of $100,000. Where does that go? That's not an organization or a community. Is that money that the city is keeping?
Yeah, that's another good question. So yes, that was something that under HUD, we are allowed to pull a certain percentage for administrative expenses. And in the previous CV1 award, we had the same allocation that was available to us. At that time, it is used to help pay for staff that are outside of the current community development division staff that work on CDBG funds. And so whenever we've had to pull aid from other staff or other departments to help work in the response for COVID, that's what those dollars have been used for. In the past, it was used to help with some of the small business CARES grants that were executed. We only pull that money if it's something where additional staff is working on a COVID response specifically.
So are those just reallocations of existing staff salaries? Is that correct? It's not like we're hiring additional people to help us administer these, or, you know, additional hours for people to administer.
Yeah, that's correct. There were no additional staff that were hired with the previous use of the funds.
Have we retained an administration fee from these funds in the past? I mean, it seems like a lot, $100,000 out of 800,000. That's quite a overhead percentage.
Yeah, well, HUD allows for us to retain up to 20% of an award for administrative expenses. Typically the CDBG program and our annual entitlement award that we get every year from HUD, we do have a 20% administrative amount that we retain, and that does help pay for positions, community development staff positions, myself included, helps pay for a portion of it. And previous to that, we've never received, of course, Cdbg Cv funds. So this is the first time we did have an additional administrative amount that we could utilize. And as mentioned, the one that was utilized before was really to help with additional outside department staff and helping to execute COVID dollars.
Okay, so I maybe might have missed it. Do we, when we do CDBG funds on an annual basis, do we normally keep an administrative fee out of that? I don't remember that.
Yes, we typically do. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and is this the percentage that we have kept in the past?
Yes, we're limited to no more than 20% from the HUD agreement to use for administrative expenses.
Okay. All right, that's the only question I have. Mayor Franklin,
yeah,
I see your hand raised.
Thank you. I just, it is, you know, when you're just looking at that administrative overhead line, it looks quite large for what would typically be administrative overhead. But I do have to add that these grants are wickedly cumbersome and staff time intensive. It is Kember's entire job, other than the small amount of time she gets to spend on human needs grants. So these federal dollars, the county, for example, has an entire department that just does grant management. And so it is a complicated system and requires, unfortunately, a ton of staff time and follow up with the grantees. So that is why we do take that administrative overhead.
Understood. Councilmember Murphy, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, based on Councilmember Vogley's comments, I went back through the packet trying to find out if I had missed the breakdown on this 393,000 being reallocated back to prior recipients, and I'm still not finding that. So I'm unclear at this point whether we've been provided that information. And just for the sake of clarity, Kember, have you provided that to us? And if so, if you could point me in the right direction, and if not, if we could get that as a follow-up, I'd just like to understand where those dollars are being placed. And not only that, but also the previous dollars. So maybe if we could see previous dollars, the reallocation, and then the total, that would be helpful. And again, if I've missed it, let me know, but I did want to follow up since Councilmember Vogley had referred to page 4. I didn't see it there.
No, as far as what you're specifically asking for, no, that was not in the resolution, but I would be happy to provide that at the next meeting next week.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Good call, Murphy.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to item 11, the briefing on alleviating homelessness. And I think we've got Julie here for that. Correct, Julie?
Yes. Am I unmuted and can you see my screen?
You are unmuted. I can't see your screen. Ah, here it goes. Perfect.
Just give me one moment, please. Okay. So good evening. Like I said before, I'm Julie Willey, the Community Development Director. And tonight I'm just here to give you a brief overview of some of the current things that we're doing to address homelessness. On a daily basis, multiple city departments are responding to the effects of the growing numbers of individuals and households that are living without suitable and stable shelter. And we're working as fast as we can to ensure we have adequate services and shelter and to create more so that people can move to living environments that better meet their needs and to address the negative impacts of our businesses and house residents are experiencing. A working document was emailed to council that listed many of the established programs and practices that have been developed over the past several years to address homelessness and the complexities surrounding it. And prior to the pandemic, we were making strides in addressing the growing needs, but it was recognized that our city and our county did not have enough adequate resources, shelters, programs to serve our growing homeless population, and it has only gotten worse. COVID has increased the number of those who are chronically homeless in our city, and it's changed the coordination of our homeless response systems in our city and in our county, which has created new dynamics and new work moving forward. Today, we are addressing the current challenges head on to ensure we don't become overwhelmed with the public safety and health challenges and are unable to manage the situation as we have seen other cities do. We are also working to develop new strategies and are moving very quickly to prepare for the American Rescue Plan Act opportunity to bring our city up to the level of service needed to adequately address our current urban homeless challenges. In this preparation, we want you to know that we are being methodical in ensuring that our future plans and strategies will be successful for Everett and that we will build from that success. We want to use our finite resources wisely to target the needs for our city, to support our county, and to be in collaboration with other cities as they develop new services and shelter.
Julie, could you pause a second? I see Pipa's hand up.
I do too.
Thank you. Julie, did you mean to show the, yep, thank you. That might be what we would need to, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. I was wondering why that wasn't, it looked different, so I appreciate you.
That's better, it's bigger now.
Yeah. Gosh, thank you so much.
You.
So for tonight, I wanted to just touch on 3 areas. The first is an update on the pallet shelter expansion. The second will address the homeless student task force. And I will close with some of the work that the city is currently doing to alleviate chronic homelessness. So as you know, in July, the pallet shelter pilot opened and our co-ed team successfully moved 24 people who were chronically homeless into this new community. The pilot has accomplished moving individuals who were formerly disinterested in services to now being working with navigators and case managers to consider new options for how to live. And although there were not expectations for quick success, we are excited to hear that individuals are making different choices now that they have safe and secure shelter. I'd again like to recognize the gospel mission for their leadership and flexibility in developing this project with us. And together we have learned so much about what a well-planned and managed shelter can look like. As we move forward, we want to build on this success and the EGM pilot site and are excited to see what's next. And speaking about what's next, as you know, we have a contract in place with Pallet Incorporate for the purchase of 40 pallet shelters and 1 bath and shower unit, with the expected delivery in December. The Gospel Mission site will be prepared to host 10 to 20 additional units this fall, and we plan to be ready for occupancy on January 1st, 2022, which will be the earliest date that we are able to have occupancy based on the hearing examiner's ruling. In addition, Faith Lutheran Church has initiated a land use and permit process pre-application for a small pallet shelter community for 6 to 8 families on a vacant parcel that they own, and they're currently doing neighborhood outreach. Staff is also busy vetting city-owned parcels for the viability of hosting pallet communities for targeted populations, such as women, couples, those in recovery, those who are workforce ready, and we plan to bring them back to you later, as well as identifying management agencies, which is also a mandatory and necessary component. Regarding the Homeless Student Task Force, the city is committed to providing resources that support the coordination of efforts to address student homelessness and want to close the on-ramp that leads to children and young families being unhoused, whether they find themselves in the situation alone or as part of a family. Closing that ramp for kids today can change the entire direction and destination of their life and can help eradicate chronic homelessness in the future. At the request of Mayor Franklin, a group of 24 homeless service and housing providers, students with lived homeless experience, and key leaders from both Everett and Muckatil school districts and community settings joined together as the Homeless Student Task Force this past spring. Joe Alonzo, CEO of Cocoon House, and Dr. Joyce Stewart, former educator of Everett Public Schools, chaired the task force and brought unmatched expertise, perspective, and determination to addressing this challenge. Over 9 sessions, the task force dove deeply into learning about the reality of being a child, a teen, a parent, or a family who is living without a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and how difficult school success is because of it. They learned of successful local and national services and identified gaps for seamless care and support. At the end of their study, the task force members made short and long-term recommendations for the city of Everett to consider implementing and supporting. Of those recommendations, none of them are things that the city can accomplish without partners who are leading the efforts. Based on the recommendation, there are 4 areas that we want to prioritize. The first is community education, as the task force felt strongly that local city governments and the public need education on student homelessness and the associate factors, financial and societal cost impacts, income-based developments, and available funds and how they are allocated. The second core area is advocacy, as there's a strong recognition that there are gaps in the resources that address children and families living unsheltered, and advocacy to larger systems is needed to address that. The third core area, which will be no surprise to you, is the development of housing and shelter. And the final is the need for community, county, and school district partnerships that the city can help facilitate and support so collaborations and new programs can be developed that are led by service providers, faith community, school districts, and colleges to address the student homeless need. We see addressing student homelessness today as an absolute mandatory and plan to request ARPA funds to begin doing that work. Sometimes when we talk about homelessness, we make big generalizations and simplify circumstances or reasons, when each person who is homeless has their own unique challenges and experience, and each person's pathway back to stability is also so different. As I proceed from here, I'm primarily speaking about the individuals who are chronically unsheltered, many whom we see sleeping on our sidewalks or camping in our parks, and many who don't have enough stability or safety to even think about a different life. People who are chronically unsheltered sometimes have behavioral health challenges that make it very difficult for them to accept services or make different decisions. In addition, there are barriers to helping people that we are required to follow, which include the lack of available and accessible mental health services. We've been told that there is a 6-week wait for intakes, that there's a lack of mental health providers, and in some places are only available to meet people virtually. In addition, these chronically homeless individuals oftentimes have conflicting feelings about services. Sometimes they're against them, sometimes they are not quickly available or they don't fit their needs, and they have a lack of an awareness of what is available to them or if they are eligible. The lack and accessibility of a variety of shelter options, of course, for couples or people with pets or people with mental health or physical challenges, or for individuals that are living in their car is also a huge barrier. In addition, the lack of intensive case management in our community makes getting the help that they need in shelter situations or in the community when they're living on the streets. And although I can't speak to the specifics, many of the police reforms and legislation have impacted our community care ability, as officers have limited ability to enforce drug violations due to mandatory referrals to treatment or their inability to assist detaining individuals who are in dire need of mental health services. The city knows solutions for our chronically homeless is not a challenge we can tackle without the commitment and support of partners. I want to recognize the efforts that have been done over the past several years and to be mindful of how important it is for the city to work in partnership with the county, other cities, faith-based and nonprofit providers to help address these deep needs and the challenges that we're experiencing in our community. Moving forward, we look forward to coordinating with our partners and exploring new solutions that will build and direct efficient systems of care for those that are living chronically unsheltered in Everett. A brief snapshot of what we're currently doing to respond to homelessness includes our multifaceted, multi-department, unsanctioned encampment response team. This team has established internal policies and procedures that ensures we're following the required laws, are first offering connections to services, and it maps out a clear path for when a cleanup needs to take place. To help us to be more responsive, Public Works plans to add additional staff to readily address a vacated encampment or trash that is accumulated or is blocking. In addition, the Community Development Division will be adding a homeless response coordinator who will help with the internal encampment coordination and assist with new projects and strategies that address homelessness throughout our city. We also continue to build our social work internship program at our library to add more pathways for people in need to access help or get direction. COET certainly continues to be responsive to emergent calls and concerns, as well as in providing proactive service outreach and education on the laws. In addition, our police department's distribution of referral cards, which has numerous resources and services in the region, is another way outreach is happening today. Our police department has also been developing a COET tracking and dashboard app, which will be a new way for data to be tracked, reviewed, and shared. COET has also been imperative in identifying and placing individuals into shelter. In the past 3 months, 40 individuals were placed in the pallet pilot or in a newer hotel voucher program that the county had provided funding for. These additional shelter beds are making a difference. In particular, the Gospel Mission shared that their residents have acknowledged the stability provided by the pallet shelters is the critical reason that they have hope and are able to take steps to address their use and their legal barriers. As a city, we want to build on that success, and we are excited to add more pallets. With that, I will bring back more information as it's available and look forward to sharing how the American Rescue Plan Act funding may be used to alleviate homelessness in our city. Thank you. And with that, I will certainly take any of your questions.
Thank you, Julie, for that great information. We will start with Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Moore, do you have any questions for Julie? I saw a shake of the head, no. Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Murphy.
Yes, thank you, President Stonecipher, and Julie, thanks for the update. I know that briefing was just kind of a real fairly short overview. There's a lot that goes into dealing with all of these various issues, and we could probably spend a whole workshop or a whole day talking about the issues. But one of the topics that I think you only maybe touched on briefly on one of your slides about community partnerships was the Claire's Place project. And I know that most of us on the council lived through the approval of that project several years ago. And I've asked about it, I've checked into it. It seems like from everything I can hear that project has turned out to be fairly successful. I've not heard a lot of concerns or input from the community in that neighborhood that there are problems. And I wonder whether or not that sort of a low barrier housing project might be another strategy, and maybe it is that's just didn't get covered tonight. But is that still on the long-term horizon for potentially looking at doing another Claire's Place type project somewhere in the city that would further help?
Well, absolutely. That permanent supportive housing is an important part of a pipeline, right? So as people progress out of shelter and people look for more stability, there are some individuals that always are going to need a level of care and support. And so the permanent supportive housing model provides that for people. And so absolutely, that is a need. And so as we develop our pipeline for affordable housing and for low income housing and for permanent supportive housing, that will need to be a part of our conversation. And I would also gander that it gets to be a part of our conversation with other communities in our county so that we all have opportunities for supportive housing units in our cities. So that would be my quick answer.
Okay, good. Well, look forward to hearing more about that strategy as well as the others you mentioned. And thanks again for the update.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Vogely.
Thank you so much, Julie. I wish that you could come back like once a month. I know that would be an awful lot for you and probably for all of us, but we need to continue to hear about all of the things that are needed and all of the things that we are doing. On the slide about homeless student task force and educating the public, I'm wondering if one of those times that you do come back, we could hear about the McKinney-Vento legislation. I heard about that once at an Everett Faith in Action meeting, and I was blown away. And I think that that would be a really great educational piece if we're allowed to have that at council. And for the homeless response part, I have a lot of thoughts and feelings, but I'm curious if the Public Works is going to be utilizing the Department of Correction work crews that we voted in, accepted whatever we did a month ago or so. If that's just part of it, you know, because staffing. And I'm just going to ask them all and then you can respond. Sorry. You know, Claire's Place, I'm super glad that that happened with that 2016 ordinance. I was not yet on council, but council put it through, and then I was on council when it went away about the time Norton didn't get a chance to have anything built on it. So I think that that ordinance would have been a really good way to continue something else like Claire's Place, but we don't have that anymore. So we'll have to work extra hard. And that's just a comment. Extra hard to get public lands that could just be utilized for $1 to house all of these people. And that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Roberts.
Thanks, President Stonecipher. Julie, thanks for the update. Really appreciate this. I am particularly taken by the list of community partners, as it really shows there's it's more than a village, and they're clearly all people who are working very hard to try to address a very, very tough situation. I guess the one question I would have really focuses on the American Rescue Plan Act funding. I mean, I keep hearing that those dollars are not being allocated as fast as they can. And I don't mean that to be critical, but I'm just interested in what you can tell us, because I know those are not dollars that we control, but dollars that come from other sources. So I'm just interested in where that is and what, if anything, we can do to help move it forward if it is not already happening. So anything you can share with us would be appreciated.
I see Mayor Franklin has her hand up, so I'll let her answer that question.
Yeah, you know, Julie might be able to answer it better, but a lot of the funding that is coming through Snohomish County. And so Snohomish County is my best friend right now, and I'm in meetings with them every week to talk about how they are allocating their American Rescue dollars, the other dollars that are coming through that are not directly allocated to the county, but are to tackle issues like housing and homelessness and mental illness. They are still building their Office of Recovery that will help them navigate all of the different funding sources that are now available to help us address these community issues. They hired Michael Fong, and actually, if you watch the press briefing with the Public Health District and Jason Bierman, Michael Fong is a part of that this week and talks a little bit about some of the work and that we will be doing across jurisdictions to tackle these issues. So there is more to come, but the county is really leading the charge on most of those funding sources outside of the allocation that's coming directly our way.
Well, thank you. And looks like Julie, you were about to
Well,
jump
I
in.
was just going to say, it's to our advantage to wait and kind of see if we can leverage our funds with our county funds to double the impact. That's another reason why we want to be methodical and take our time in making decisions.
And we are bringing back recommendations to you, big buckets and ideas that you as a council will deliberate. And I believe President Stonesafer wants to host a workshop for the council to do just that. And those recommendations from our city will come to you very soon.
Well, that's really good news. Thank you. And I look forward to the workshop. And the only other comment that I would make is that it's real clear, not only in Everett, but in other communities, that successful strategies require both the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure for the housing, and the social infrastructure to deal with the social service issues, where they work together. And I think several people have mentioned Claire's Place. Everett Gospel Mission is doing that work now. Where they work together, there's some really great success stories. And so I think it's just important that we recognize there are two parts to this infrastructure and do our very best. And I say that knowing that we are, and thanking you for bringing that forward. Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Tui.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if it's for the mayor or Julie, but on the American reserve funds, what is the time for utilizing those?
I believe it's until 2024. So there is a long timeline for us to spend. This first, we received the first 10 million-ish, and the second 10 million around that's coming to our city should come in the late spring. Our recommendations that you'll be receiving for opportunities to invest those dollars in our community to tackle things like chronic homelessness and behavioral health challenges that we're seeing will come to you for the full 20 million of our funding and what we think we should use that for. But we only have half of that money right now, and we have a few years to spend it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We just have such a great need. I hate to wait too long on the county because I don't know if they'll figure out what they're going to do. So just need to utilize what we have. But thank you.
Yes. And I don't have any additional questions. Just want to thank you, Julie, for bringing this information forward. And I'm glad to hear that the pallet shelter planning is moving forward. Sounds like there's some good ideas for how to utilize those buildings, even as temporary structures. And I guess we are at the end of our agenda here for tonight. As noted at the start of the meeting, and I think you'll see on the screen here, you may contact Deb Williams in the council office for instructions on watching, listening, or participating in our weekly meeting. She can be reached by phone at 425-257-8703 or by email at dwilliams@everettwa.gov. You can contact all council members by emailing us at council@everettwa.gov. Thank you. And with no further business, we are now adjourned.